So far away, Lucas, and lovely audience at home, same question. Who is your favourite character from the Addams family?
I love them all, but I think I'm going to have to say Wednesday Addams. Just committed to the bit of the goth.
I think you mean as well Wednesday Addams from the live-action movies, right? Because every single line Wednesday has in those like 2 live-action movies starring like Christine Ricci are just fucking like 10 on 10 money, right? Every single line she has is hilarious.
Why are you dressed like that?
Like what?
Like you're going to a funeral. Why are you dressed like somebody died?
Wait.
There were some formative films, Karl, I'll say that much.
Well, don't start with me on that,
This
please.
is it. You did this. This
Oh,
has nothing
will
to
you
do with
stop?
allergies. You did.
Thing Tea Thing is the name given to the Addams family's beloved pet, disembodied hand. And first of all, Lucas, did you know that Thing, like his name was Thing Tea Thing?
I just thought the thing's name was Benjamin Grimm.
We did talk about Benjamin Grimm in a Wiki Weekends episode a few weeks ago, right?
We did indeed, yeah.
Go watch us talk about The Thing, like the comic character in a video that's in the description below. We're not talking about Benjamin Grimm, The Thing, we're talking about Thing from the Addams family, who's called Thing Tea Thing.
Yeah, big distinction. There's the thing or there's thing.
Yes, and we're talking about the latter today, specifically the version seen in the 1960s Addams Family TV show, and the fact that throughout that show, without anybody noticing, Thing Tea Thing kept changing appearance.
I'd not really seen much of the 1960s show. Like, I always saw the thing, like, you know, I always saw the movies from, like, the 90s and stuff, and
Which
then
are top
obviously,
tier,
like,
right? Like,
everyone...
absolute, just top tier, just schlocky kids' entertainment, right? That still holds up. I think those 2 live-action Addams Family, I know there's 3, I know there's a 3rd one, that fucking sucks, we're not talking about that. There's also, like, the animated remake, which is closer to the original, like newspaper comics, which I watched and didn't really rate that highly. But those first 2 live action Addams Family movies are fucking incredible.
And I wouldn't make a birdhouse.
Why not?
I just wanted to read.
Not on my time, Four Eyes.
Yeah, they really were, and I haven't watched them in ages, so I presume they still hold up well because they're just kids' films, right?
Yeah, they still hold up, partially because of the performances.
Good show, old man.
Gomez,
Caramia?
marvelous news. I'm going to have a baby. Right now.
Because the performances from every character are top fucking notch, but also just the visuals are really good. Like the fact they got like Angelica Huston, who looks so much like Morticia Addams does in the original newspaper comics, despite the fact the newspaper comics are deliberately like exaggerated, and they still managed to find an actress and get into a costume that looked like that, despite the fact her proportions in the original like little comic strip are inhuman.
Yeah, I know, you know, they managed to get Uncle Fester. They managed to get someone who looks exactly like him, too.
Yeah, like the only person who doesn't look like the comic counterpart is Raul Julia as Gomez Addams, because he's far too handsome.
It's meant to be that he's absolutely swinging with Morticia, right?
Yeah, but he's suave as fuck, and that's why she falls in love with him. Like he's just balls out confidence.
Addams!
Caramia!
Mon cher! Darling! Take care!
Dirty pool, old man.
And much has been written about how good the relationship between Morticia and Gomez Addams is, and it's largely the result of the fact that Gomez Addams unapologetically just fucking loves his wife.
Oh, yeah. Gotcha.
And like it's very often the counter to like, oh, I want the gin to my Pam, right? It's like, why the fuck would you want that relationship when Gomez and Morticia are right there as relationship goals?
Tish, seeing you like this, my blood boils.
As does mine.
This wheel of pain.
Our wheel.
To live without you, only that would be torture.
A day alone. Only that would be death. Knock it off.
100%. And I was going to say, I don't know much about the 60s adaptation, but I am kind of surprised that they managed to pull off a character such as Thing.
Yeah, well, the effect is not seamless, and we'll get to the reasons why in a moment, but for anyone unfamiliar with the character of Thing, in the various bits of Addams Family media in which they've appeared, they are generally portrayed as a disembodied right hand who is, like, depending on how you read it, a pet or trusted confidant of the Addams family. And Thing is able to communicate and interact with the world through nebulously defined means. Like, they are able to, quote-unquote, see despite not having eyes, and they are supremely talented at a number of things. For example, Thing can play chess despite not having eyes, and is in fact very good at chess.
Don't torture yourself, Gomez. That's my job.
No, Tish.
Thing can also seemingly fly, or at least float a little bit. And he has, like, Thing pass him, like, the fencing saber, right? When he's, like, sparring with his lawyer. Or his accountant, sorry, right? Where, like, Thing can, like, just float, grab the saber and throw it to him.
What would it mean to you if it turns out that in canon within the Addams family, similar to how they normally do the effect, it was just that the man was invisible apart from his right hand?
I wouldn't be surprised. Like, that's the thing, I wouldn't be surprised if that was the story. I also wouldn't mind if they never explained it. And it doesn't really need to be explained, right? That's why, like, Thing is just called Thing.
That's my friend, Thing.
What a charming helper.
He's been my companion since childhood. You don't think he's peculiar, do you?
Of course not. We must accept our friends for what they are.
Like, what's that? What's Thing? And the fact that the Addams family don't see it as weird, that they have a disembodied hand that just walks around their house and just does things for them and talks to them. And that's the thing as well, Thing can talk. Like, Thing can seemingly understand, like, language and can communicate in various ways, either via Morse code or sign language. And one of my favourite just jokes in those live-action Addams Family movies is where Gomez is fucking depressed and he's just sat eating cereal. And, like, Morticia's in trouble and Thing's trying to, like, get his attention. And he starts, like, tapping out in Morse code with the spoon. And just when Gomez is like, Thing, calm down, you know I hate it when you stutter. Just that line is so fucking good, and it's delivered with such sincerity by Raul Julia.
Morticia. Morticia what? Slow down! It's terrible when you stutter!
God, and that's one of the really wholesome things about Addams Family, is that I think no matter whether you know too much about the Addams Family, I think most people just appreciate the fact that they're willing to accept all these different weirdos for who they exactly are.
Yeah, I mean, it's why people hold up the Addams Family as one of the most wholesome fictional family units, despite the fact they're intended to not be that. They're like an inversion of the idea of the wholesome family unit. And that's a weird trend in media, right, where there's these supposedly wholesome relationships and family dynamics that are actually not that wholesome when you think and break them down. Like, I mentioned the Jim and Pam relationship earlier, right, where no doubt every guy out there who's been on any sort of dating app has seen I'm looking for the Jim to my Pam. And then you go watch The Office and their relationship is fucking awful and both characters are just like huge pieces of shit.
Do you think that'll ever be us?
No.
What is wrong with you? Why did you even bring me here tonight?
I don't know. Let's break up.
I'm using something known as hyperbole here, but they're not nice people, and they're certainly not people that you should strive to emulate.
They're definitely not relationship goals either, and the show goes to quite a large point to show that itself. It's not even in the subtext. They are literally in marriage counselling and worried about their relationship through some of the later seasons.
And perhaps the more immediately problematic one is the Harley and Joker relationship, right? where
that's just fully toxic. Yeah.
And like people romanticize that, even though the Harley Joker relationship is, as we often say, it's not the subtext, it's just the text.
I was the brains behind some of Mr. J's greatest stunts. Not that he let anyone know it. I guess all good things have to come to an end. So, we broke up.
To the point where nowadays Harley is pretty much written to be not a partner of Joker anymore because they realise that, like, hey, she spent 20 odd years being just abused by this man. At some point we need to make her her own, like, individual character. And the one, you know, speaking of the 90s and toxic relationships, I was just going to bring up Ross and Rachel.
Ross and Rachel, another one, right? Like in the 90s, they were seen as like, ooh, the will they, won't they couple.
Nobody likes change. Okay.
Should we do something?
Yeah, never cheat on Rachel.
And it's a fairly well-worn topic online nowadays that the Ross and and it's a fairly well-worn topic online these days that the Ross and Rachel dynamic is fucking toxic and horrible. But if you go back and watch the show, or like, you know, the clips I'm about to put in to demonstrate what I'm talking about here, audiences at the time were fucking all in. For example, in the final episode of the show, where like Rachel's leaving the message on the answering machine, and Ross is like, "Did you get off the plane? Did you get off the plane?" And the audience loses their shit when it turns out, oh, Rachel did get off the plane to go back to be with Ross because they were meant to be together.
I got off the plane.
And in the years since, it's been broken down how fucking awful their dynamic is. For example, like, well, just that moment there. Like, maybe people have forgotten the context for why Ross is, like, screaming at his answering machine, asking if Rachel got off the plane. Like, Rachel was offered a really, really good, high-paying job in another country.
Yeah, like a high-up fashion job in Paris, I think it was.
Which was the entire arc of her character. Her entire arc, like, the first episode is her turning up in a wedding dress. And the first couple of seasons are about her discovering her independence and realising she can be an independent woman who doesn't need a man. Like, she's literally spending, like, daddy's money.
You're single. Have some hormones.
See, but I don't want to be single, okay? I just want to be married again.
For the first 2 seasons, and she eventually learns to become independent and, like, fend for herself. They undo that in the last episode to just get her together with the guy who it's clearly shown is a weird, jealous prick.
Wow. Carol really messed you up.
Excuse me?
Yeah, she turned you into this untrusting, crazy, jealous sycophant. All right, so I don't know what sycophant means, but the rest is right.
Yeah, and there's many different pieces of evidence towards that, but just, I always go back to the bit where it's like, you know, obviously, red flag the fact that he cheated on her the second that he thought they were on a break. And, like, regardless of what you think of that, just the fact that it's the night of, he's like, fuck it. I'm not going to, like, talk to her or anything. I'm just going to assume she cheated on me, so cheat on her back.
Yeah, then after that, where, like, you know, Rachel forgives him, and all she asks him to do in return is, hey, I wrote this really heartfelt letter expressing my feelings about, like, what happened. Can you read through that and tell me if you agree or disagree with it? And Ross is like...
Well, that's what I was going to say, yeah.
He doesn't read it, and he acts like him being asked to read a letter describing his, like, girlfriend's feelings is too much of an ask.
And the fact that even when... It's like, look, it completely understandable. She asked him to read this, like, 32 pages or something at midnight, and he fell asleep. If he'd just gone, I'm really sorry, I tried to read it, I fell asleep, and I'll read it now and let you know. And just communicate it in any way, which obviously it's just
it's a sitcom,
right?
You can't communicate because that'd be like 90% of the thrust of every episode gone, right?
Yeah, exactly. But the fact that it's like this portrayal of, oh, she's so unreasonable, she expected me to, like, read this long letter. It's like, no, she's basically forgiven you on the one premise that you read this and just admit some fucking fault.
And she says here, if you accept full responsibility, I can begin to trust you again. Does that seem like something you can do? Does it?
There comes a point in everyone's life where you've got to take a bite out of that shit sandwich. And I know what most guys' response is, like, I don't want to eat a shit sandwich. Here's a spoiler. No one wants to take a bite out of a shit sandwich, but you have to because it's your turn.
And the thing is, she has forgiven him. He has agreed to, like, take fault without knowing he's admitted to take fault.
That's the thing that it turns out at the end of the episode, right? That he admits that he was wrong. And just the idea of, like, he throws away his relationship because he literally cannot admit that he's wrong.
Ross, you have what you want. You're back with Rachel. If you bring this up now, you're going to wreck the best thing that ever happened to you.
Yeah, I know. I know. You're right.
He fucked up the relationship, and he managed to get everything back that he wanted. He managed to get Rachel back, and he's like, dream girl that he's loved for all these years, and literally dumped his current girlfriend for.
And all he has to do is just admit that he was wrong. And that's the thing, even if he doesn't fucking believe it, like I said, you just got to take one bite, not even the full thing, just one bite of that shit sandwich. Just one.
All he has to do is just swallow his pride, and let's move on. She's forgiven me. We don't need to talk about it again in the future. Just, okay, I was wrong. I'm sorry. I've got everything I want back.
He can't do
it. And he can't do it.
We were on a break!
I'll track down the author, because I'm not remembering all the details here, but there's a very good poem that was written by someone after Friends finished airing, from someone who was just examining the relationship from a female perspective. And it's essentially just like a letter to the character of Rachel of like, girl, see the signs. So we did a little bit of research behind the scenes, and the poem started life on Tumblr. And I'm hoping that this is the original author. It says here it's just Tristan Mattia on Tumblr. If that is not the original author and this is someone who reblogged it on Tumblr, I'll put a fact bar below correcting it. We're doing this on the fly, but I think the poem is interesting at least, right? Because this is a female perspective on the relationship, and it is essentially a poem directed at the character of Rachel. So, Rachel, the world is full of men who would pick you apart and call it kindness. Men who would criticise you down to your ankles and then turn around to say that you worry too much about your appearance. Men who would consider themselves more important than your career goals, but also belittle you for not having career goals. Men who would complain about your past and then put themselves in the way of your future. The world is full of men who would confuse obsession with romance. Men who would make a meal out of the core of you and call it love. Men who would lay your flaws out like a banquet and then shove them in your face. Men they would say they love you in spite of you. Rachel, the world is full of Ross Gellers.
And that's a really good point, is just the idea of like the men who would confuse obsession with romance. He just sees Rachel as this like trophy from afar that is his sister's friend, which is, a little bit creepy, but there's not that many years between them. It's fairly understandable at the age that they were at, but it's one of those things of just he obsessed over Rachel for the longest time, and at no point in the show is he ever happy with who Rachel is as a person. He's just still continued to be obsessed with the idea of Rachel.
Somebody wants people to know you have a boyfriend.
Oh, no. That's not what he's doing. He's just really romantic.
And that's a topic for another day, Lucas. And maybe one day over on Wiki Weekends, a sister channel that we run, we'll cover Friends or a character from Friends and discuss this in more detail. Because it is interesting, right? That, 20, 30 years ago, people idolised that relationship. People wanted that relationship for themselves. They wanted their own Ross Geller, a whiny, possessive dipshit. Who, in one episode where he writes down all of her flaws on a piece of paper, and
the pros and cons list. Yeah, it's like, you weren't meant to see that. How dare you? It's like, how dare you fucking write this list?
And then they both sides it, right, where Rachel's being unreasonable, and she has that absolutely fucking just god tier comeback, where it's like, well, what would you write on my list? And it's like, I wouldn't have wrote one. I wouldn't have wrote one because it would absolutely crater your fucking self-esteem, and it's a dickish thing to do. And the best bit about that episode is when Ross is begging her, well, let's just make it even. Just say one bad thing about me and we're even. She goes, okay, you put too much gel in your hair. And he obsesses about it for the rest of the episode.
Okay, you're whiny, you're obsessive, you are insecure, you're gutless. You don't just sort of seize the day. You liked me for a year and you didn't do anything about it. And you wear too much of that gel in your hair.
And at no point does he realise, or have the self-reflection of, wow, she made one criticism about my appearance and I've fucking obsessed over it for like the past 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
He just sees it as a personal attack on himself instead of like a moment to grow.
It is one of those things, right, of like, it's, again, twisted to be like, but Ross is so romantic because he says like, oh, but on the pros, like, she's Rachel or whatever it says, just like, every single con doesn't matter because of the idea that she is Rachel, though.
And there is something to be said about that idea. Like, the show Modern Family deals with it quite a bit with, like, Jay and Gloria. And they have that great episode where Gloria gets glasses and she looks at Jay. She's like, oh! She realises, like, he's so old. But then the end of the episode is, like, Jay gets rid of his hearing aid, she gets rid of her glasses. Like, well, I can't hear her and she can't see me. We're going to be in love forever!
Oh! Listen to me, Jay Pritchett. A lot of people assume that I married you because of your money, and that's only a very, very small part of it.
I'd like to go back to that.
I married you because you were sexy. You still are. Who knows for how long that's gonna last for either of us. So we have to keep making an effort for each other. Next time you go to Barney's, I go with you. Maybe you're just making the wrong choices.
Not always.
Not to mention, like, Ross is just generally not a very nice person. Like,
oh god, no.
The episode that always sticks out is when he has the baby, and they get the male nanny.
I was thinking the male nanny episode, yeah.
Ross gets a really competent, exceptionally well qualified male nanny fired, and his only justification is it's weird.
He is too sensitive.
What? Too sensitive to take care of our baby?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, that guy, he's amazing.
Sandy made Madeline's.
This is exactly what I'm talking about.
He doesn't become insecure about how hot the nanny is. He becomes even more obsessed with just the idea that that is not what a male job should be.
Yeah. He's so obsessed with, like, it's a traditionally non-masculine role, and he just can't get over the fact.
I mean, I never thought of you as a guy who needed his men to be men. You know, because I gotta tell you, Ross, it's not like you just came in from branding cattle.
I'd be more worried that, like, holy shit, Freddie Prinze Jr.'s in my apartment. And I wouldn't worry about that, obviously, but just the idea of, like, of all things you would guess that Ross would just be obsessed with the idea, this dude's hot as shit.
What's the other one, isn't it? It's like her co-worker, who Ross is obsessed with the idea
Mark,
that the co-worker's trying to sleep with her. And it emerges in a later episode that he does have a crush on her, but at the same time, that shouldn't matter either way, because he should trust his girlfriend, right?
Like, he's totally valid to not trust the dude, like, but Mark is clearly, you know, trying to give Rachel favours to eventually hit on her. And, you know, because you can see that from the audience perspective at very least, like, it's hinted at, if not outright kind of shown, but he should at very least just have the base form of trust with Rachel.
Yeah, and he just never, ever lets it go. And I said,
he never thinks...
Constantly belittles a job.
Yeah, he never just thinks to himself, oh, but she does have the option to say no, and I should trust that.
And it's one of those very telling things where clearly the character doesn't trust Rachel because he wouldn't trust himself in that situation.
Which, you know, is shown again with just the fact that he takes all of, 2 fucking hours to cheat on her and go, oh, but I was drunk and I thought you cheated on me. It's like, got that excuse line straight up, didn't you, Ross?
And you know what, Lucas? Gomez Addams would never.
He would not.
Gomez Addams would never, ever do that to his wife, because he loves her too much. He's completely and utterly in love with her. He is a devoted, doting father to all of his children, who shows, like, genuine, earnest interest in everything they do. And like I said, the family dynamic is supposed to be dysfunctional, but the idea, it's like The Simpsons, right? Of The Simpsons were written to this dysfunctional family, like that were a deconstruction, a swipe at, like shows that had like the traditional nuclear family dynamic, but them being dysfunctional and still loving each other is actually more wholesome and commendable and something you should strive towards, right?
We are going to keep on trying to strengthen the American family to make American families a lot more like the Waltons and a lot less like the Simpsons.
Huh? Hey, we're just like the Waltons. We're praying for an end to the Depression, too.
And getting back to the Addams Family, Thing was portrayed in that 1960s show by the actor Ted Cassidy, who also played the family's butler, Lurch. And you might be thinking, folks, oh, well, what about in scenes where Lurch and Thing were in the same scene? Well, in those situations, Thing will be played by a producer. And the way they do it, it's a very, very simple effect. How would you, Lucas, portray a disembodied hand for a sitcom?
Well, the way I would think of it is still to this day how they do it, of just put somebody in a green screen or blue screen outfit up, just don't cover the right hand up.
How would you do it in the 60s, though?
Well, that's what I'm thinking, because, like, obviously they could, like, matte paint out people, but...
It was even simpler than that, Lucas. They just cut a hole in pieces of the scenery and just had someone hide there.
Thank you, Thing.
They just had the hand
just
come
stuck
out.
the hand through holes in the scenery, right?
They just moved around that way.
Okay.
It was like, you were really overthinking it there. Luke, it was that simple. Just cut a hole in a piece of a scenery and that's where Thing is.
Well, that's why I was confused, because I was like, I know how they do it modern day, but that just wouldn't be feasible back in, like, a TV show in the 60s to be able to... Even if it was, like, manually matte painting things out, like, that's just not doable.
You were way, way off the mark with this one, Lucas. No, they just got Ted Cassidy to just sit there, like, behind, like, a piece of scenery and shove his hand through it. And I mentioned in the intro that Thing's appearance would change. You might be thinking, well, is that because sometimes Thing would be portrayed by Ted Cassidy and sometimes by a random unnamed producer? No, it's because Ted Cassidy would admit years after the fact that, yeah, I'd get really bored playing Thing, so even though Thing was supposed to be a right hand, sometimes I'd use my left hand just to see if anybody would notice, and nobody ever did. So throughout the show, he would switch hands to see if anyone noticed. No one did. So Thing, like, just technically turns from a right hand into a left hand.
That's what I was gonna, like, mention before we went off on a tangent, is like, oh, you were very specific to say that the Thing is a right hand, and I was like thinking to myself, has the Thing never been portrayed as a left hand? But clearly they have.
Yep. Well, the idea is it's the dominant hand, right? Like the traditionally dominant hand for most people.
A lot of people in the population, yes.
Yeah, like handedness tends to be like towards the right hand, and
just
yeah,
the
Ted
lefties
Cassidy
are rising up in the comments. Karl.
The lefties
are coming.
You know, you try typing on your right-handed keyboard, motherfuckers. Which is a thing, right? I really feel for people who are left-handed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I didn't realise this until like I did some research on it for a Today I Found Out article years ago about like basically every consumer device is designed to be held in the right hand.
The worm has turned, is it not, my tin-plated friend? Look at you, you who were once so proud. Feel the wrath of the left hand of Burns.
My life begins today.
Example that I always think of is when I was in school and you see left-handed people try to write, and like their hand would just scrape on the page over the ink and would smudge their
left-handed ledges. Now I can write all the way to the edge.
Like the stuff you'd write in the journals and the textbooks, you writing them from like left to right, which meant that like, you know, right-handed people, your hand would go along the paper. Left-handed people couldn't do that.
And that's obviously, you know, our perspective, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that are right-handed that write right to left that get the same problem, right?
But even just the design of paper, where the margin is on the left. And it is kind of fucked that like a quantifiable percentage of the population are just not catered to in that way, because 90%, I think the statistic is like 9 out of 10 people are like right-handed, or they write primarily with right as their dominant hand. So just they never take into consideration that left-handed people exist.
The last stat I remember ever seeing was like maybe 1 in 7. That might have been like in a specific region of the world, but at very least it's a proportion that's enough where Ned Flanders was not crazy for opening up the left-handed store.
And when I was researching that article, something that I happened upon that I can only imagine is just endlessly frustrating for people who are left-handed is that when they try to express, hey, it fucking sucks that stuff's not designed to be used by us, right-handed people sometimes mock them for it. Like, well, why do you need, for example, left-handed scissors? And it's like, okay, well, you try using the scissors with your left hand. It's like, oh, they don't work. Yeah, because they're designed to be held in the right hand. And the reason you've never noticed that they don't work when held in the other hand is because you've never fucking done it.
Nearly every product released at this point in like our modern times has been ergonomically designed, but it's been ergonomically designed
to be held
for right-handed people.
So let's just look at phones. Phones are a great example where most of the important buttons for a phone are on this side, because that's the side where your thumb would rest when you're holding it with your right hand.
Mm-hmm.
So when you hold it with your left hand, things that are, the design process suggests should be immediately accessible are not.
Again, you mentioned like keyboards and mouse and keyboards. Like we're sitting at PCs right now, and like I'm looking at my keyboard, and it's like, okay, it makes sense to have your left hand on all of the buttons that you're typing with, and then the right hand is like, okay, cool. I can use like the arrows, the enter key, whatever, the return key, and then your mouse. Your mouse is there. That's the thing that like you're more dexterous with, and that's normally on the right side. And you click with your index finger, which is the left click. And just you don't have to think about this if you're a right-handed person, but when you take a moment to think about it,
and there are many parallels with handedness to just other things that require like just a level of consideration beyond none at all. Like I think of the amount of times where I've seen the headline of something that involves a camera not working with people who have dark skin.
Mm-hmm.
Like the amount of like Face ID, got that on my iPhone. I don't even think they've got it figured out yet, because you still hear about like people struggling with it in low light if they have dark skin. But just for years, people with dark skin were like, why doesn't Face ID work? And it's, well, at Apple and the place where they're developing it, they only tested it with people who are white.
Let me show you what I mean. Hi, camera. I've got a face. Can you see my face? No glasses face? You can see her face. What about my face? Well, I've got a mask. Can you see my mask? So how did this happen?
And there might not be a lot of diversity in that sample group, so just all of a sudden, if you're not in that one thing, it's like, oh, well, this makes it harder for everybody else. And I think, like, I was speaking to someone recently that was talking about the fact that, oh, they had, like, a very late diagnosis of, like, autism because they're, like, a woman, and generally speaking, all of the, like, research was done on young males.
Yeah, diagnosing just medical issues is a fucking nightmare for people who fall outside of the very narrow definition of just white dude. Like, for example, there's a lot of like skin conditions that are almost impossible to diagnose in people with darker complexions because all the medical textbooks teaching doctors to recognize them feature pictures of people with white skin.
There's something new that should help you out. Combines a nitrate with a blood pressure pill. It's targeted to African Americans.
Targeted?
Yeah, well, see, we tend to have nitric oxide deficiencies. And studies show this drug counteracts that problem. It's the first drug to...
What kind of studies are you talking about? What kind of studies are there?
And I believe there was a doctor who tried to address that by, hey, we're going to find people with darker complexions who have these conditions, get pictures of them, to teach doctors, hey, maybe someone's going to come in who has dark skin, and it might be handy to know what this condition looks like on someone with that skin tone.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't even think about it. Like, I don't think about that, because I don't need to.
But I was going to say, we're in the demographic where, for the most part, we don't need to worry about these kind of things. And it's, evident at times and sometimes not evident.
But when I hear about it, I feel bad. The one that really, really gets me, and I don't understand how this became, like, a controversy. Like, it's one of those things that, like, Fox News had, like, a fucking field day with, like, calling it woke. And it was where the people making crash test dummies had to respond to a campaign to make female dummies. And it was framed by places like Fox News and like those shit parts of Reddit that you shouldn't really go to as, oh, they're trying to make crash test dummies woke by like gendering them. And if you actually read the reasoning for it, it's really, really, really harrowing and makes a ton of sense of, hey, crash test dummies are based on the average measurements for a man. And men tend to be taller than women. And as a result, the safety procedures for cars are designed to protect people with that exact body type and not anything else.
female test dummies is the exact same as making children test dummies. Of like, well, not every single person that's going to be in a car is going to be 5'10" and weigh 75 kilos.
Yeah, and the numbers were fucking harrowing, where someone like managed to did a meta-analysis of like car crash fatalities. And it's like women just die, on the whole, a lot more than men do for no discernible reason.
Females in the front seat are 73% more likely than males to be injured in a crash, 17% more likely to die. Since the 1980s, the government crash tests that give out those 5-star ratings have relied on smaller male dummies to represent females.
And when they dove into the reasons why, it's like, well, it's really simple. Just the height of a seatbelt is standard in most cars, and it's based on the measurements of an average man. And that's where, like, adjustable seatbelts, they became a thing that hopefully becomes standard at some point. But people fought against it being standard because they didn't like it for no other reason than, well, it doesn't bother me.
I mean, I can think the majority of cars that I still get into nowadays, I've not really noticed that being a thing. It's still pretty standardized, and that might just be me getting in a lot of, like, cars that aren't from 2025, but yeah, it's just one of those things again of like, well, why do you think that that's the case? It's like, well, we just researched it less.
Yeah, and like I said, when they were campaigning for, hey, adjustable seat heights and, like, you know, gendered crash test dummies, or at least crash test dummies that have, like, you know, a variety of sizes to represent the variety of body types that might be driving a car. For example, hey, maybe we should make some crash test dummies that, you know, have a larger carriage than average for, you know, for Americans, who, on the whole, tend to be a little bit larger than the average crash test dummy, which is based on measurements taken decades ago. It's like the culture war nonsense that goes on these days. Every time I see something like this, I'm genuinely fascinated by it. And I just know that any discussion about it is going to come, like, at least in places where a layperson might be discussing it, it's going to be drowned out by fucking idiots.
Yep.
Like, just screaming and calling it woke, when the actual, like, underlying mechanics and reasoning behind it is fascinating, in some cases harrowing. Like the whole thing about, hey, don't just like women die in car crashes way more because seatbelts are designed for men. It's like, that's fucked up. That is kind of fucked. I would not like that. If I was a woman and I was getting into a fucking car and I knew that I was like a quantifiable percentage more likely to die in a car crash just because a guy designed the car, like the seats, and didn't want to change them.
That thing is like, you know, they have booster seats for kids and stuff to make them
safer,
more of a correct height for the seat belts. But small people don't get that. It's like, they just don't get it. And rather than maybe make a booster seat for every person that's less than 5'10", we could just adjust the seat belts a bit.
Well, I think there's a really, really interesting story about when seatbelts became mandatory for cars, because they weren't mandatory for a lot of years. And when they first made seatbelts mandatory for cars, there was like a movement across the US of like citizens against seatbelts because they saw it as like mollycoddling on behalf of the government, and there were people who would cut them out of their cars.
I oppose it on the basis that it replaces the free will of the individual with the desires of the state.
You can't force people to do things, you know. If they think that it's necessary, they'll do it. If they don't think so.
The question here is whether we have the right, whether we have the responsibility, whether we have the judgment to turn to the citizens of this state and be there in 1984, big brother.
In protest.
I was going to say, the reason that they made a law to make them mandatory is because the majority of people at the time were protesting against seatbelts.
Yeah. And like there was like came to a head when like some dipshit who was like the head of like the students against seatbelts got into a car crash and just got flung through his fucking window and died.
Any attempt to restrict drinking and driving here is viewed by some as downright undemocratic.
It's kind of getting communist when a fella can't put in a hard day's work, put in 11, 12 hours a day, and then get in your truck and at least drink 1 or 2 beers.
And that's an argument that continues to this day. Like, you must have seen like the pictures of like the seatbelt things that you can put into your seatbelt holder, because now modern cars beep when the seatbelt's not plugged in, you're in motion.
Oh, so they just put like something that just jams in there and doesn't actually have you wearing a seatbelt.
So you don't have to wear your seatbelt when you're in your car. And the really funny thing is that, of course, they sell them with the Punisher logo. And the kind of person who's going to buy a product like that, I don't think they get the irony. Also, the brazen tempting of fate to circumvent the use of a life-saving device by plugging in a fucking metal skull into it.
Yeah. Like,
so I've seen Final Destination.
Oh, it's very ominous.
One or two beers. One or two beers. One or two beers.